So that gives me hope that we can figure shit out.
And it makes it accessible to basically everybody.
Yeah.
Just imagine all these people building, especially as you make it simpler and simpler, more secure. It's like anybody who has ideas and can express those ideas in language can build. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's ultimately power to the people, and one of the beautiful things that come out of AI. Not just a slop generator.
Well, Mr. Clawfather, I just realized when I said that in the beginning, I violated 2 trademarks, because there's also the Godfather. I'm getting sued by everybody. You're a wonderful human being. You've created something really special, a special community, a special product, a special set of ideas, plus the humor, the good vibes, the inspiration of all these people building, the excitement to build. So I'm truly grateful for everything you've been doing and for who you are and for sitting down to talk with me today. Thank you, brother.
Thanks for giving me the chance to tell my story.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Peter Steinberger. To support this podcast, please check out our sponsors in the description, where you can also find links to contact me, ask questions, give feedback, and so on. And now, let me leave you with some words from Voltaire. With great power comes great responsibility. Thank you for listening, and hope to see you next time.
Hello.
So you vibe coded a project, but then when you launch it, it's just crickets. No customers, no revenue, no passive income, nothing. Well, today's episode, we bring in Jonathan, aka Mr. Jitestream Courtney, who teaches us, hey, how do you actually use AI to generate revenue to your vibe coded project? He starts the episode off with the foundations. He talks about what you need to know, non-AI related, in order to build a business. After that, we get to the fun, share your screen, Claude Code, Claude, little tips and tricks and what you can do. But I encourage you to listen to the whole episode, because I think people who listen to the whole episode are going to be a dangerous weapon who understand not just how to vibe code, but how to get customers to your vibe coded project. We are back on the Startup Ideas podcast with Jonathan, J Ice Cream.
Hey,
Day to the Ice Cream. Courtney, welcome back. Mr. Ice Cream, by the end of this episode, what are people going to learn?
What people are going to learn is how to actually make money using the AI tools and get users while also using the AI tools as sort of like a support. And I think the reason I want to talk about this is because there's a huge conversation around how to technically use all these tools, all of the cool use cases. I mean, I sit down and just watch your tutorials and then just go and do that stuff. But I think what's missing from the conversation a little bit is the practical
I am alright. How are you?
Well, what's the point in having a business that's not making any money? So I want to go into that side of it. I want to show you kind of what the job of a CEO is. I want to like remind maybe that some parts of the audience what the job of a CEO is. And I also want to show like my blueprint for getting customers to buy things.
Okay, so basically there's a lot of people who have vibe coded a thing and they put it out there and it's crickets. And what you're going to show people is how to go from crickets to dollar signs.
I wish there was something that would rhyme with crickets. Crickets to money rickets.
Yes. Exactly.
Crickets to dollar signs. I mean, I would say that I use these tools like 20% of how much you and your audience use these tools, because most of my time is focused as a CEO on how do I actually make money, how do I get users, how do I increase revenue for myself and clients. And so I just want to bring that cold money angle to all of this. And, most of the hardcore vibe coding stuff leave to you guys to make the cool products.
Yeah, and for the people listening, watching this man named J Ice Cream, and you're like, why should I trust this guy with like an hour of my time? This guy looks like a German, more a Berlin version of Greg Eisenberg. Like, who is he? Is he even real? The answer is you've made millions of dollars using a lot of these techniques, right?
Yes, I run a couple of businesses. Some of them are like multi-7 figures, some of them are 7 figures. For example, Facilitator.com is an example of one of my businesses that's out there, that's public, that people know about. I like build businesses in like the enterprise space, in the like B2C space, and also help other people like, sell their stuff as well. So I do spend a lot of my time trying to figure out how to make money and how to sell stuff and how to turn something that's not selling into something that's selling. That's what I have been doing for the last 14 years. Oh yeah, my main business is called AJ and Smart. If you want to like find the main thing of it.
Well, thank you for your life story. Let's get into it.
Shit. Okay, look, before we get into this, I think that what's really important is to understand, I really want people to understand, if you're running a business, if you consider yourself the CEO of the business, there's a massive misconception out there. I'm on X all the time. I see this misconception building up, that building stuff, being able to build stuff and being able to build like super complex systems using AI tools is basically your job, and then somehow you make money. And I have a lot of CEO friends. They're really excited about all the AI stuff. And what I always ask is like, so cool, you spent like 4 or 5 days doing all this stuff. You've built all these cool systems. You've built all these automations. And are you making more money now? Or are you making any money now? And I think these AI tools, if used wrong, and if you don't really understand your role as a CEO or as an entrepreneur, you could just lose loads of time like procrastinating. These can be procrastination machines that you're basically building for yourself. And so for me, I want to point people in the direction of the most successful people in the AI space. Do you know the name of the CEO of Anthropic?
Yeah.
Do you know how he looks? Do you know how he looks?
I think he's bald, right?
He's actually not. He's not.
That was a good guess, right? CEO bald.
Yeah, CEO bald. Okay, you know who the CEO of OpenAI is?
Yeah, Sam Altman, good head of hair.
Well, do you know the Levels.io X account? What's that guy's name?
Peter Levels.
Okay, all of these people are like big in the AI space, right? They're all entrepreneurs, they're all CEOs, and something that they all have in common that no one ever points out is that these guys, at least 50% of their job is promoting their businesses. And so for me, what I want to get in your head as a CEO or as an entrepreneur, if you're the person who's the founder, CEO, entrepreneur, your job is to promote your business. Of course you want to build all the cool stuff, of course you want to make the thing, but your actual key job, and then you build around yourself and build things that support that, your key job is getting out there and promoting your business. And so when you look at someone that Levels, when you look at Peter Levels, when you look at his X account today, the very first thing he has posted there is essentially a long form promotion for his photo AI tool. But people on X and people who are using all these AI tools, they're like, marketing sucks, like all you have to do is build it and then people will come to it, you just have to build great shit and then people, that's not actually what's happening in real life. It's completely counterintuitive to the fact that you know the names of all the people who build all of your favorite tools because they're on every podcast, because they're out there all the time making themselves known. And so this is what I really want to get across here, just as like a preamble, is that your job as CEO is not, your job description is not, hey, I'm going to use AI tools and get really good at them. Your job is not, hey, I'm going to build cool like little products. If you are not able to promote those things, no one's going to use them, and it becomes completely like a little self-contained procrastination station. Like an analogy that I use for my friends is, imagine you start a restaurant. You're like, this is one of the best restaurants ever. You spend an entire year.
我脸跟你好，我觉得我看金子哇，跟他很像。
The perfect system set up, you can book everything. It's so easy. Just go online.
但是你
literally
大
never
多
told
数
even
都
one
是
person
像
this
你的
place
吧？
exists. That will die pretty quick, even though you get to do your little fun procrastination thing. All that being said, I love all the AI tools. I'm going to show you how I'm going to use them, how I use them, but I want to show you how I actually use them in line with what my job is.
这个好吃还是
Which
希
is,
望好
actually,
吃
it's my job to get users. It's my job to make money.
都好吃。
It's actually my job to make deals. While at the same time, I happen to be the person who also makes a lot of the stuff that we sell. And so if you're making a cool thing, if you're making a cool product, like, for example, Greg has ideabrowser.com, yet, Greg, how much of your time do you spend promoting all your businesses? I mean, this podcast is a huge part of your job,
我
right?
是用糯米粉做。
This is something I think that has gotten a little bit twisted in the whole like builder space, because people don't realize, oh, like Greg and Peter put crazy effort into making sure that their content is useful and valuable so that people know about them, and therefore people can figure out what it is that they are offering to the world. And if you were never creating content, if you were never creating content, no one would have a clue about any of this stuff. And so for me, I just want to get that baseline before I go into showing how I would recommend thinking about selling stuff. So let's open, and now you know what? I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you a beautiful vibe-coded blueprint for how I think about selling the whole, or how I think about like selling stuff in general. So this is, so I put this together earlier just as like a, I mean, this is how I show it, just to show, hold up to the screen. This is how I show it to my like clients, like literally scrawled on a piece of paper. But I was like, I'm going on Greg's podcast. I'm going to actually show this in a fancy vibe coded way. So, and then what I'm also going to do is show the AI use cases for these steps as well. But there's no point in me doing this until people really understand the basics and understand how money is made in this, selling products space. The first thing, you talk about this all the time, but I'm just going to like really take a step back and show the key ideas. The first step is you need to figure out how to get traffic from somewhere. And the only two categories of getting traffic are organic or paid. So either you're out here like me right now going on other people's podcasts, you're running events and networking, you're doing posts on social media, free content, or you're paying for ads on Meta, TikTok, YouTube, whatever. I always recommend push that traffic not straight into the product, like not, hey, just buy my product. I always recommend push them into a holding pattern. So step 2 is the holding pattern. And the holding pattern is basically where you're just slowly warming people up. And it's like your email newsletter, it could be your podcast. So your podcast, for example, the Startup Ideas podcast, is a great place that people get value from. You don't need to promote a lot of stuff there, but you're keeping people sort of in your space, in your world, and the attention is on you. YouTube content, posts on X, that keep people engaged. This is basically the holding pattern. And that's almost like your daily content, your weekly content. The next thing, and I think I would say a lot of people on X are okay at the first two, so they know how to, post and, create a lot of followers, create a lot of engagement. But I almost see nobody who's good at moving people from now I have some people listening to me to that turning into money. And so that's the next step. The next step is thinking, okay, I've got all of these people, they're watching what I'm doing, they're excited about what I'm doing. How do I move them to a selling event? And a selling event is something like, for example, a webinar. I talk about these all the time. So you could do a live demo of your product and show people how it's being used. You see like companies like Superhuman doing this all the time. You see almost all the AI companies doing demos where you can see how these products work. And you don't even necessarily need to do a pitch at the end. It's just, you now see how this product works. You now see how valuable it is. That's a live workshop. That's a live webinar. That's a live demo. I'm running these all of the time for myself and my clients and my partners. Second thing is an email campaign. This could be as simple as like a string of 3 or 4 emails that lead people in your holding pattern to actually making it a purchase. And you see these all the time. You can see the examples of this all over the place. And by the way, I just got hit with a webinar campaign from Superhuman today because they want me to buy Superhuman Teams, or they want me to upgrade to Superhuman Teams. And so I just got hit with a campaign to get me on one of their webinars. The other thing is, if you want to pay, and a lot of people don't realize this, you can retarget people with a paid campaign that are already in your world. So let's say you have like a couple of thousand emails that you've collected. You can actually put those into Facebook. And again, it's not like they take the exact emails, not like it all perfectly lines up. You create a lookalike audience. And those emails can be used to retarget people on other platforms, or similar types of people on other platforms, to push them towards something. And the last thing, which people don't really think about, if you're building a holding pattern, and for me, if I look into my email, like, okay, let's see the last 30 people who signed up. Oh, this person has an email address at Microsoft.com. We work with enterprise clients. Let me see if I can reach out to this person and jump on a call with them and see if they would be interested in working with us. And so this selling event, which a lot of people just call campaigns, are the bridge between I'm holding people in this space to now I'm moving them over to they're buying something from me, they're getting a free trial, or they're booking a call with me because they want to buy something expensive. And if they don't convert, which most won't convert, they go back into the holding pattern and they stay there until the next selling event. And if you look at the example of Peter Level's X account, you can even take a look at Jason Fried's X account, or any of the people that you associate with selling really great, interesting digital products who you wouldn't consider to be very marketing heavy. They are, going on other people's podcasts to generate traffic, which pushes people into their world, whether that's their X account or newsletter or their YouTube channels or whatever it is, or the podcast, their own podcast. So it's from their traffic to your traffic, and they keep people there. This is where they're posting like their personal stuff, and Peter is always posting about how to cook steaks in an air fryer, and all of this stuff is happening there. That's not where you're generating traffic in the first place, but that's where that's happening. And then every so often, you see them make a clear push to selling, a clear push to, okay, I want to have people push towards this thing now. And you saw on Peter's account, he did this e-girl post, which is now pinned on his account as we speak, and then he posted the bump in sales that happened after he did that post. And so I'm not saying, by the way, that he's cynically sitting there and being like, this is specifically a sales campaign and this is how much I'm going to make, whatever. Not that that would be a bad thing or anything. It's just that this is an activity that's happening from the holding pattern. It's an activity that's not just happening randomly from an ad. He's not doing his sales pitch on podcasts, that when he goes on other people's podcasts. He's going on other people's podcasts, and people get confused about this, by the way. Why is this person, why is the CEO of Anthropic right now at Davos getting interviewed by Bloomberg, right? Is it for the good of humanity? No, his job is he's a promoter. He's moving people from here to the holding pattern, to their world, to understand it. When I'm watching the interview with the CEO of Anthropic, Darius, I am thinking he's doing a really good job at doing this sort of pre-pitch to enterprises who are now going to understand, oh, Claude is the enterprise AI company. And so he's bringing people, he's creating that attention, bringing people to that holding pattern. And the selling events for Anthropic, they have an outreach team because they're actually the company that goes and tries to get these big enterprise deals. But you're following them on Twitter, you're on X, and then they post about Claude Cowork, you're in their world, you're in their sphere, you're hearing about these things. Again, those companies are huge. We don't have those types of budgets, but this is the general, I would say, loop that's happening the whole time. We're always trying to get new traffic. And let me do this in a meta way. I'm on your podcast now. I would like to get traffic, right? I'm trying to expose myself to new people who might not know me yet. The next step is, ideally, people are going to start searching who I am, because when you're on other people's content, you don't want to make a pitch. So people are going to do the work themselves to figure out who I am, where I am, what I'm doing. They'll then fall into one of my holding patterns. It could be that they listen to the podcast, email, newsletter, whatever it is. Eventually, as some of them have seen this week, because we did a big campaign, they're going to get pushed towards something. Right now it's a webinar, and that webinar will be push them again towards some people doing enterprise calls with us, some people buying cheaper B2C products with us, and then 90% of the rest of them fall back into the holding pattern bucket. And as a promoter, ideally you're waking up every morning and you're able to understand that this is the oxygen of the business, essentially. So for example, if there's no traffic coming in, if you're not doing any traffic building activities, then there's not going to be enough people in your holding pattern, so that when you run a selling event, there won't be enough people in that selling event or campaign, which means you're not going to have a lot of sales. And so for us, for example, we're running meta ads, I'm on this podcast, I'm always out there trying to get as many people into the holding pattern as possible. Our biggest holding pattern is our email newsletter. And when I see that an extra 5,000 people have joined the newsletter, I can mentally say that means another 200 people will turn up at the next webinar, and that means another 12 people will buy something. And so the machinery starts to make sense. And
the motor, so to speak.
Yeah, I should change it to the motor. and like by the way, look, check this out. I also have this little toggle here, which is, well, how do you use AI in all of these things? The reason I didn't have AI here up front is because this is the core element of your job as a CEO to make money. And then AI is supporting these elements. And I'll show you, I'll turn it on, and I'll show you how I literally am using these tools. I'll open up the tools, and I'll show you how I'm doing this. I'll show you how I'm like creating a marketing campaign, and I'll show you how I'm using Claude in particular to support my marketing activities that make money or grow traffic or keep people in the holding pattern, etc., etc. Let's turn on the AI use cases.
有多快？logo 也包得很好。
So for the audio listeners, what am I looking at?
You're looking at, I have flipped a switch which says show AI use cases, and so we're now in AI use case mode, and underneath each of the activities, so let's say we're talking about going on other people's podcasts, I have put a use case for how to use AI tools. And also in the background, there are very beautiful like stickers of me flying around all over the place, and the cursor has changed to an ice cream. So it's gotten pretty serious, I would say.
I'm loving what I'm seeing right now, visually, and I never realized before we get into this, I never realized how similar you look to Jesus.
Oh, yeah, well, now with the hair like this, the next one of these blueprints will be the Jesus blueprint. And so what you have here, by the way, if you want, I put this as a Vercel, I made like a little Vercel version of this, if you want to put it in the description.
Yeah, we will.
I vibe coded it in like 20 minutes, so it's probably barely holding itself together. But what I want to show you actually is, so I don't think we need to go into all of these things. Maybe people can look those up, or people can click on the link and they can see the ways to use AI for these things. I think the best thing, and what I know about your podcast, is people just want to see inside the software and see how it's actually being used. So will I just jump in and show how I'll show you in a very meta way how I prepared to go on your podcast today, and how I also transitioned from using Claude Standard to Claude Code to go through the entire like flow of this. Sound good?
Perfect. Sounds great.
Cool. Let's jump into little baby cute Claude. Now, what I'm going to show you, most of your listeners, since they're so technical already, they're gonna be like, yeah, I already know about this. But I know from talking to a lot of CEOs over the last 2 weeks, most people still don't understand how to use Claude properly, especially how to jump from Claude to Claude Code when needed. So this is a project in Claude Code this is a project in Claude. This was my essentially marketing assistant today for going on your podcast. What I wanted to do was, so you can see here in my little notebook, I just collected all of the physical notes that I had on this promoter concept that I wanted to talk about with you at the start of the podcast. And then I wanted to work with Claude to, number one, just create the graphic to explain to people. But number two, I wanted to do some research on the last podcast episodes I did with you to figure out like what was working and what's not, based on how many views and how many comments, etc. But also I wanted to figure out like where in my angle, like where in my script is it going to lose people's attention, especially for your audience. And the other thing is, I don't prepare for stuff. I'm like one of these classic ADHD entrepreneurs, and so usually I just wing it. And I wanted it to kind of work with me in creating almost like an ADHD friendly kind of overview, because I don't want to read a script either. And so the first thing I did here was I recorded just straight to my phone, like a 15-minute like brain dump on all of the different things I was thinking about talking about in this podcast. And I dumped it into Claude, and I had it basically turn that into, actually it's back here, I had it turn that into a ADHD-friendly, scannable document that I could just read in the background while I'm talking to you so that I don't forget what to do. And that, let me just open that for you here. So let's open the HTML. So on another screen, I have the notes of the things I don't want to forget in the background that I can fly through like this. You remember I talked about Dario, about Jason Fried, about levels, and the process of doing this and bringing up the blueprint, the process of doing this helped me also figure out, okay, when I was looking at this, I was like, maybe I should actually create the blueprint so that people understand what I'm talking about and create a visual of it. So step one is I dumped all of my verbal information into Claude, and probably like everyone else is doing, my prompts are all done by Whisperflow, so I'm talking to Claude as well. So if you're not using Whisperflow or something like it, I would highly recommend using that. So you can just like, so I dumped my transcript, or I dropped my audio file in there, then I just talked to Claude for a while, and at the same time, while I was doing all these little projects, I'll just go back here, sorry. While I was doing all of this, I was having it teach itself instructions for this particular project. So at the end of every one of these chats, so I gave it an initial instruction. It was like, I'm going to be a guest on Greg Eisenberg's Startup Ideas podcast today. You're going to be assisting me with putting together strong content angle, strong ideas, and strong strategy for delivering the most value to his audience. This is currently the most popular episode I've done with Greg. And then I had it at the end of each chat. I said, hey, Claude, this was great. Now I want you to give me a pastable set of instructions that I can put into your instructions for this podcast as we continue along with this episode. I also had it do in a separate chat. I had it do research on you. And so we also created a research document, so a research file, so it doesn't have to do that research fresh every single time in every single chat. It already went through your X account, it already went through your YouTube account. And all of that led to me being able to create a really simple overview and then move on to, hey, okay, let's create an infographic that represents how I want to zoom out of the big picture for customers and show them how this whole creator flow works. And by the way, prompts of this detail are only really possible if you're able to verbally play with them and just talk them out. And the cool thing here, for anyone who doesn't already know how to do this, is in normal Claude, in the Claude project with all the context I've given it, I had it build this blueprint for me. And when I was relatively happy with it, so when it was at like this point where it, so it's actually already, so it gave me this first simple version of it. And I was like, this is pretty fine. Then I asked it here, I said, cool, I'm going to move this project over to Claude Code. So I'm going to take the HTML file, but what I need from you is to create a Claude MD file that gives you the Claude Code, the entire context of this project, as much context as possible. And so in this moment, I had to create the Claude MD file, the markdown file, and spit out the HTML file, downloaded all of them, and then I moved over to Claude Code, where I actually started building this little piece of software, this little piece of like one-off marketing software. I'm sure your audience already deeply knows how all of this stuff works, but it's kind of fun anyway, just to see how it got brought over. So here you go. So I created a project folder then on my desktop, which was about this podcast. And I said, okay, I'm working on this promoter blueprint. Take a look at the Cloud MD file to give yourself context. And then I wanted it to move into ask user question mode or plan mode. And I had it just grill me on the ideas for the podcast again, which gave me even more context to work with, which then spat out the blueprint or the promoter blueprint that I showed you, even though we spelled it wrong. And then I had to put it on GitHub, spit it out to Vercel so that we are where we're at right now. It sounds like a lot of stuff, but all of that took about 1 hour, I would say. And almost all of it was happening in the background while I was doing other stuff as well. And so that's like a really super simple flow for any sort of CEO or marketer to go from, okay, I'm researching something, to now I'm making a marketing element that I can use. In this case, I'm using it for the traffic part of my flow. And I mean, if you want to see a more complex setup, for example, if we go here, I'll show you like where I'm actually building, how I'm actually building out campaigns at a deeper level, let's say. A campaign that will, I hope, make $450,000 this week I can't guarantee that it'll make $450,000. I think it will though. At least 350.
Based on the hundreds of workshops and webinars you've done, it sounds like from what we talked about, it sounds like you're going to do between $250,000 and $500,000.
Yeah, it's usually in that range. We have like 4,000 webinar signups right now, so we're hoping it can go much higher. So we're doing, basically, this is my AJ and Smart marketing expert brain. So this is where when I'm not like building something, when I don't need Claude Code, and actually I know I could just set up all of this on Claude Code, but somehow I prefer using this interface when I'm just focusing on marketing stuff. I like to see the overview. So this is my marketing copywriting machine, essentially, and you can see I'm using it for a lot of stuff here. And it is my first place I go to when I have a new email campaign that I want to run, or when I have a new webinar that I want to run. And the important element here is that I spent a lot of time setting up the files in the document. So I have the books that I've written. I had one of my favorite things here is a 17,766 line doc, which is me finding other people's marketing emails and just compiling them and then learning from them, having Claude essentially boil down the main learnings and add them to the Claude MD file, which I'm still playing around with so it doesn't get too overwhelmed. But let me just show you how I would normally then move from the traffic phase maybe to the sell phase or something. So what I'll do here is I'll say, okay, so I just finished a podcast episode with Greg Eisenberg. The topic was how I use AI tools as a CEO. And what I want to do, I'm going to give you the context of that. I'm going to put the Claude MD file here so you have the context of what I talked about. What I want to do is I want to create a very simple, juicy downloadable or lead magnet that I could send people to after this episode that will bring them into my newsletter. So it's got to be something free. It's got to be something relevant to this episode that I'm doing with Greg Eisenberg. And I just want you to pump out 3 lead magnet examples. Let's go. And so what I'll do is I'll bring in the file that we are using, the Claude MD file, instruction file we're using for your project, just so that I bring that context in here as a one-off thing. I don't want to bring it and replace this entire context here. And I'll have Opus sort of come up with a first feel for it. And that it's not that you're, as the CEO, completely replacing your entire brain with Claude. The thing that your brain is there to do is look for these opportunities, is to think about, I'm in the traffic phase, I want to move to the holding pattern phase. Let's see what it came up with. Okay, the promoter blueprint 1-pager, I think that would work well. So a PDF of the 4-step framework. That's pretty good. 50 prompts for the promoter CEO.
Hours?
The cave
It's
dweller
not that
audit.
addicting.
Are you building or
Pokemon Go is
promoting?
more
That's really great.
addicting.
A quick self-assessment that exposes the builder trap, and why it works is provocative. That's actually pretty funny because one of the angles of this is
I think
like,
Pokemon
you don't
Go
get
is more
stuck
addicting
building
than
stuff and
this.
not promoting. And so
I'm
what I would do
fighting
here
against
then, I would talk a little bit. I would take the
person.
transcript from this podcast if it was afterwards, and I would give it even more context. Turn that into a lead magnet. Of course, I would then move to Claude Code to create the lead magnet landing page, and we're done. And so for me, this process used to be like me chatting with my team, which I still do, of course, but now we can do multiple projects at the same time. Me chatting with my team, then me asking a designer to make the landing, to make this blueprint, then me going off and trying to figure out what's the best way to put together a landing page. Should we do it in ClickFunnels? Should we do it in Framer? Now, this entire process of marketing for me, that maybe it would be a week for us to, okay, let's say a full lead magnet campaign, 2 to 3 days to get it right. Now we're talking about half a day. And it just feels so much faster. You can make one-off campaigns that feel super custom to the content you're creating. And basically, that's it. That's basically how I'm using it. Like, that's as far as I'm going. It's very lightweight.
So I got a lot of thoughts. I think, you kind of downplayed it. You're like, I know this audience, knows these tools and stuff like that. I think that the way you use instructions, the way you're setting up projects, I think it's helpful to see how other people are using it,
Dude, I learned it from your podcast.
It's just helpful, right? It's helpful. It's like even like a little tidbit around for marketing related projects. I just like to start with the Claude interface, like the back app is interesting.
Yeah, I'm getting better at moving or knowing when I want to move between Claude Code and Claude. One thing I will say is, so a friend of mine who's running a company called PipDex, he's gone thousands of levels deeper than me into all this Claude Code stuff, also watching your channel and learning from it. And his co-founder messaged me the other day, and he was like, John, use the ask user question skill for designing your webinar and ask it to really grill you. And so what I did is I trained a Claude project on the webinar structure that I like the best, and I have it do a 30-minute ask user question flow on me, and the end results coming from that, when I'm doing it in Claude Code, just because it's quicker, it feels quicker, just hitting the 1, 2, 3, whatever, is something that's making me feel like I might just move the whole thing to Claude Code. But for now, I'm just feeling good about having the two separate interfaces.
I mean, for context, 8 months ago, you barely knew what this stuff was, right?
Dude, I didn't know. Remember, we met in May, and we were in San Francisco, and I was going to all these AI events with you, and I was like, I'm basically using AI as a search engine. The end. The search engine / light assistant, and it's a couple of months later, and every single interaction, every single business process at AJ and Smart now has an AI automated element. But I will warn other CEOs out there, it's very easy to optimize for the wrong thing and end up spending, it's okay if it's for fun, but don't be me and Laura. And one of the things Laura said, she's running the business with me, she was like, I spent 3 days building this proposal builder, and then I asked Claude, would it be easier for me to use an off-the-shelf solution? And then Claude gave me an off-the-shelf solution that we could have used from day one and have it all connected. And so there's the warning of, you don't have to build everything completely custom, and remembering your job as a promoter, remembering that your job is not just optimizing the crap out of everything. And the last thing, dude, we said this in May together on your podcast, and I think it's more true than ever now. I don't think being efficient right now is the play. I think the play is scaling up like crazy. So for me, I don't think the play is, all of these processes can now be done by AI, so I'm just going to do everything myself. I think the play is, if you already have a small team, keep them, and just now you have triple the size of the small team if everyone's using these tools, and you can do 5 campaigns a month instead of 1. You can do so many more variations of Facebook ads instead of what we used to do, updating them every 6 weeks. I think the play right now is abundance and going big instead of obsessive efficiency. And I think Claude Code allows you to really play big, really play very big. It's so exciting. There's I basically feel like you can clone yourself and then just do more shit. The challenge is making sure you're doing stuff that actually hits your goals of revenue or users or whatever it is.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of people who listen to this podcast and it's their first time setting up Claude Code, and they'll set up 1,000 skills, Claude skills, before building one thing. And it's dude, no. You could use things like skills, you could use, sub-agents, you could use Ralph Wiggum, you could use all these advanced techniques, but to start with, you really just want to figure out, okay, what does my team look like? Even if it's a team of 1, what are the jobs to be done? Yeah. And how can I use this to create better products, to promote more, to experiment more, and then just start making it part of your daily routine. And over time, you're going to learn, okay, actually I could put a skill over here, I'm going to do one skill. And then over time, it doesn't need to be, don't be that, that person that measure twice is, which is the expression, measure twice, cut once.
Yes.
Just cut.
Just cut. There's so when I meet other entrepreneurs, the biggest sign for me that they're going to move very slowly is too much preparation. And I think these tools are so good, you can go straight into a project with them. Like with Claude Code, I didn't even do a test project. I was just like, I'm going to see if I can make one of these campaign pages immediately. And by messing up, and by, for example, the first thing you might hit is like the context window becomes too long and then it compresses and then it forgets loads of stuff. And I'm like, what the hell? It's forgotten all the stuff I told it. And then you realize, oh, maybe like doing projects on Claude Code is like doing little bits instead of all in one massive big mega prompt. But I had to learn that by working with it on a real project. And so I definitely think less prep, more action, and an understanding, especially if you're a CEO or a founder, an understanding that your job is to grow your business, to make money, or to get investors or to get users. And your job is not to be optimizing your admin before you're even making money.
I'm going to be doing a lot more episodes of the podcast that are like in this vein around vibe marketing, basically. Like how do you use AI to get more customers? I'm happy that you set the foundation around like, okay, before you even do this, sexy vibe marketing stuff, you kind of have to understand the foundation. But thanks for coming on and dropping the sauce. And we'll include the link in the show notes description if you want to use the ice cream cursor. By the way, that had to have been your idea?
I was looking at it, and it created. I wanted there to be a toggle to show the AI use cases, and then when I clicked the toggle, I was like, this is boring. So then I did the cutout of my face and put it in the background, and then I was like, this is still boring. Let's add an ice cream to the cursor, and I just kept adding stuff. I created a planner for me and my friends to go on vacation. It's called a Wet Boy Vacation Planner, and it's the most demonic thing you've ever seen. And so for me, that's the fun of Claude Code, is being able to just make very specific, silly things as you're going on. So yeah, that wasn't a Claude idea. Claude wouldn't recommend something like this.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode on the Wet Boy summer vacation app for sure.
So good.
So good. All right, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. Anything you want to leave people with?
Honestly, if you just accept that your role as a CEO is you're a promoter, and don't be embarrassed about it. I know people get cringe about promoting themselves. If that's not what you want to do, find a co-founder who wants to do that. It is literally the job of a CEO. You're supposed to be out there talking about your business. And again, it's not a problem if you don't want to do it. You've got to have someone in the company doing that job. It just won't work if you don't have that type of person who's willing to take the role. And just believe in yourself, love yourself. It's all good. Hello. That kind of stuff.
All right. Perfect place to leave it. Thanks again, and I'll catch you next time.
See ya.
See ya.
Ja.
%95 of engineers use Codex. 100% of our PRs are reviewed by Codex. For engineers, I don't know what job has changed more in the past couple years. Engineers are becoming tech leads. They're managing fleets and fleets of agents. It literally feels like we're wizards casting all these spells, and these spells are kind of like going out and doing things for you. What do you think people aren't pricing in yet? The second or third order effects of the $1-person billion-dollar startup. To enable a $1-person billion-dollar startup, there might be 100 other small startups building bespoke software. So I think we might actually enter into a golden age of B2B SaaS. I've been hearing more and more there's this stress people feel when their agents aren't working. There's a team that's actually doing an experiment right now with an OpenAI where they are maintaining a 100% Codex written code base. They run into the exact problems that you're describing. And so usually you're like, all right, I'll roll up my sleeves and figure it out. This team doesn't have that escape hatch. You've shared that listening to customers is not always the right strategy in AI. The field and the models themselves are just changing so quickly. They tend to disrupt themselves. The models will eat your scaffolding for breakfast. What's your advice to folks that are like, okay, I don't want to miss the boat? Make sure you're building for where the models are going and not where they are today. There's a quote from Kevin Whale, our VP of Science here. He likes saying this is the worst the models will ever be. Today, my guest is Sherwin Wu, head of engineering for OpenAI's API and developer platform. Considering that essentially every AI startup integrates with OpenAI's APIs, Sherwin has an incredibly unique and broad view into what is going on and where things are heading. Let's get into it after a short word from our wonderful sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by DX, the developer intelligence platform designed by leading researchers. To thrive in the AI era, organizations need to adapt quickly. But many organization leaders struggle to answer pressing questions like, which tools are working? How are they being used? What's actually driving value? DX provides the data and insights that leaders need to navigate the shift. With DX, companies like Dropbox, Booking.com, Adyen, and Intercom get a deep understanding of how AI is providing value to their developers and what impact AI is having on engineering productivity. To learn more, visit DX's website at getdx.com/Lenny. That's getdx.com/Lenny. Applications break in all kinds of ways. Crashes, slowdowns, regressions, and the stuff that you only see once real users show up. Sentry catches it all. See what happened, where, and why, down to the commit that introduced the error, the developer who shipped it, and the exact line of code, all in one connected view. I've definitely tried the 5 tabs and Slack thread approach to debugging. This is better. Sentry shows you how the request moved, what ran, what slowed down, and what users saw. Seer, Sentry's AI debugging agent, takes it from there. It uses all of that Sentry context to tell you the root cause, suggest a fix, and even opens a PR for you. It also reviews your PRs and flags any breaking changes with fixes ready to go. Try Sentry and Seer for free at sentry.io/Lenny and use code Lenny for $100 in Sentry credits. That's SENTRY.io/Lenny. Sherwin, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the podcast. Thank you for having me. I want to start with what's feeling like a barometer of progress in AI, especially in engineering. what percentage of your code, if you even write code anymore, and your team's code is written by AI at this point?
I do write code occasionally now still. And I actually say for managers like myself, it's way easier to use these AI tools than to manually code at this point. And so I know for myself and some of the other EMs, engineering managers at OpenAI, all of our code is written by Codex at this point. But more broadly, there's just so much energy. There's like a tangible energy internally around just how far these tools have gotten, how good Codex as a tool has gotten for us. And it's a little hard for us to exactly measure how much of the code is written because the vast majority of it, I'd say like close to 100%, is usually generated by AI first. What we do track though is at this point the vast majority of engineers use Codex on a daily basis. So 95% of engineers use Codex. 100% of our PRs are reviewed by Codex daily as well. So basically any code that goes into production that's merged in, Codex kind of has its eyes on and suggests improvements, suggests changes in the PRs. And so that's kind of what we're seeing internally. But by and large, the most exciting is just the energy that there is. Another observation that we've had is engineers who tend to use Codex more open way more PRs. So they're actually opening 70% more PRs than the engineers who aren't using Codex as much. And the gap is widening. So I feel like, the people who are opening more PRs are starting to, learn how to use the tool more and more, get more efficient, and that 70% gap keeps growing over time. And so it might have actually increased since I last looked at the number.
Okay, so just to make sure we hear what you're saying all of the code of these 95% engineers at OpenAI is written by AI. It's written and then they review it.
Yep.
It's like crazy, but that's almost like not crazy anymore, that we're just like getting used to this.
I think there's still some getting used to be clear. There's also, I think, some, engineers who I think trust Codex a little bit less, but basically every day I talk to someone who is blown away by something that I can do, and kind of like their bar of trust kind of, or like how much they trust the model to do on its own goes up over and over time. And there's a quote from Kevin Whale, our VP of Science here. He likes saying this is the worst the models will ever be. And so this is the worst that the models ever be for software engineering as well. And so over time, you just see people trusting it more and more, and then we'll see the models get better and better as well.
Yeah, Kevin Whale, former podcast guest, he said exactly that line on this podcast.
Yeah,
a few times. Yeah, Peter, the clogbot/multbot/OpenClaw is what it's called now, developer, recently shared that he uses Codex for his work, and he feels like anytime it does things, he just trusts that it has done the right job, and he's just like almost certain he could just commit it to master and it'll be great.
Yeah, he's a great user of Codex. I know he's close up with the team, gives us great feedback. I'm not surprised that he uses it. I mean, it's called OpenClaw.
OpenClaw, yeah.
OpenClaw is a great product. And then I saw that this morning, this is very recent, but this morning, I think the Bolt book was shared as well. Seeing all the AI agents talk to each other is pretty surreal.
It's basically her is happening in real life as well.
Yeah.
So just like coming back to this crazy moment we are living through for engineers in particular, we've gone from you write every line of code to now AI is writing all of your code. I don't know what job has changed more in the past couple of years, like job that we didn't expect to change this much, where just like the job of an engineer is so different. Like, in the entire lifespan of an engineer, like in the past couple of years, it's now shifted to I don't write any more code. How do you imagine the role of an engineer and the job of a software engineer looks in the next couple of years? Just like what is that job?
Yeah, it's honestly been really cool to see, and it's part of where the excitement is because like the job is likely to change pretty significantly over the next 1 to 2 years. It kind of feels like we're still figuring things out though, and so there's like this excitement I know, especially from some of the software engineers, of like we're in this rare moment, maybe over the next 12 to 24 months where we'll kind of get to figure things out ourselves and set our standards for ourselves. In terms of where I see this moving, so I think there's a common thing that everyone's saying, which is people are generally like I see engineers are becoming tech leads. They're basically like managers now. They're managing fleets and fleets of agents. I know many of the engineers on my team basically have like 10 to 20 threads kind of being pulled on at the same time. Obviously not active running Codex jobs, but just a lot of parallel threads. They're checking in on what they're doing. They're steering the agents and Codex and giving it feedback. And so their job has kind of really changed from just writing the code itself into being almost like a manager.
There's one here.
In terms of where I think this will go 1 to 2 years from now. So one kind of metaphor that I kind of always come back to here is actually from this programming textbook that I read out in college called SICP. I don't know if you've heard of it. Structure and Interpretation of Computer Programs, so SICP. At MIT, it was really popular, and it was actually used as the introductory. It was the textbook for the intro programming course for a very long time. And it kind of has this cult following. It teaches you programming. It teaches you a dialect of Lisp called Scheme, and so it like introduces you to like functional programming. It's like very mind opening in that way. But the thing that was memorable for me about that book, so I kind of read it in college. The very beginning of it kind of describes programming as a discipline and draws this metaphor to basically like sorcery. Like it says like software engineers are like wizards, and you're like programming languages are like incantations, and you're like you're saying you're issuing these spells, and these spells are kind of like going out and doing things for you. And the challenge is like what incantation do you have to say to make the program do what you want. And this book was written in 1980, so this is a while ago. And I think that metaphor is actually like kind of persisted over time, and I think it's actually playing out as we move into this new era of vibe coding, or just like what software engineering will look like. Because programming languages were basically these incantations. They've changed over time, and the challenge is always, and the trend has been that it's been easier and easier to kind of get the computer to do what you want via program. And I think the current wave of AI is probably the next stage of that evolution. It is now literally incantations because you can tell, you can tell Codex, you can tell Cursor exactly what you want to do, and then it'll go do it for you. And I particularly like the wizard and like the sorcery analogy because I think our current state is starting to move towards kind of like the Sorcerer's Apprentice, from Fantasia, where Mickey Mouse is like, he finds the sorcerer's hat and he tries to do all these things. And I think it's a really apt analogy because one, it's really powerful now. These incantations you can do is extremely high leverage. But you kind of have to know what you're doing, right? Like in Sorcerer's Apprentice, the whole plot is like Mickey goes wild, the brooms like go crazy, and everything's flooding. I think he literally
sets the brooms off on a task and then goes to sleep. And so it's like bytecoding at its greatest. And then eventually the old sorcerer comes back and like cleans everything up. And when I see engineers kind of like doing these 20 different codex threads at a time, there's some skill and there's some seniority and like a lot of thought that needs to go into this, because you want to make sure that the models aren't going off the rails. You definitely don't want to just like completely go away and like ignore the thing. But it's also extremely high leverage. Like a very senior engineer who's really proficient with these tools can now just do way more things via what they're doing. And I think it's also what makes it fun. Like it literally feels like we're wizards now. It feels like we're closer to having to making it feel like it's like a magical experience where we're casting all these spells and having software do all these things for you.
I was thinking of the Sorcerer's Apprentice exactly as the metaphor as you were describing that, so I'm glad you went there. A previous podcast guest described it as you have a genie that grants you wishes, and it's a useful frame because you have to be very clear about the wish you want. Like if you want to be big, like how big?
Yeah, or it might be like the monkey's paw type thing where it's like you call what you want, but what are the side effects? I think that the analogy is great. And the crazy thing for me is just the staying power of that book. Sickbee, like it's called the Wizard Book. People call it the Wizard Book because that is the metaphor that they kind of weave throughout the book. And we basically reached that point now, which is really cool.
There's two kind of threads I want to follow here. One is I've been hearing more and more. There's this like stress that people feel when their agents aren't working. You fire off all these codex agents, and then you have to keep staying on top of them. Oh shit, when's that working? I'm wasting time. Do you feel that? Do you feel that across your team at all?
Yeah. I mean, it happens all the time. And I actually think like this is where the interesting part of all of this lies right now, because these models aren't perfect, these tools aren't perfect, and we're still trying to figure out how to best interact with these with codex or with these AI agents to get work done. We see this come up all the time. There's a particularly interesting team that we have internally. So there's a team that's actually doing an experiment right now with an OpenAI where they are basically maintaining a 100% codex written code base. You'll have the AI write code, but you'll obviously end up like rewriting a lot of it, and you might need to like double check and change things. But this team is just fully codex pilled and just like leaning in entirely. And they run into the exact problem that you're describing, which is like, their challenge is, I want to get this feature built, but I can't get the agent to do it. And so usually there's an escape hatch where, then you're like, all right, I'll roll up my sleeves and like figure it out. And then instead of using codex, I might use like tab complete and cursor and things like that. But this team, for the experiment, this team doesn't have that escape hatch. And so then the challenge is like, how to get the agent to do this. And I actually think we're going to be publishing a blog post from some of our learnings here. But a lot of fascinating like paradigms and best practices are falling out of this. One interesting thing that we've noticed, I don't know if this is what you kind of feel, but we definitely feel it here, is a lot of the time when the coding agent is not doing what you want, it's usually a problem with context and just like information that you've given it. It's just either underspecified or there's just not enough information around how to do something available to the agent, available to codex. And so when you have to solve it through that, the challenge is then to add documentation and actually work around this limitation and basically encode more tribal knowledge that's in your head somehow into the code base, either via code comments itself or code structure itself, or via text files like .md files, skills, any type of additional resources within the repository, so that the model can better do its task. There's a whole bunch of other learnings from this group that I think is fascinating to explore. But yeah, kind of removing that escape hatch of no longer using the AI has allowed them to start piecing together a lot of the problems that we'll have to solve if we really want to lean into agents.
Another issue people run into, you talked about how people are shipping PRs like crazy, a lot more PRs if they're working with AI. Obviously, code review is becoming a bigger challenge. Is there anything you've figured out in your team to help speed that up to make that scale and not just create this terrible job for people where they're just sitting there reviewing PRs all day?
Yeah, I mean, one thing is codex reviews 100% of all of our PRs at this point. And so I actually think so. One really interesting thing that's happened is the things that we tend to hand to the models immediately tend to be the things that annoy us or like are the most boring parts of software engineering. It's also why it's more fun now because we get to do more of the fun things. For me, speaking more for myself, I really hated code reviews. It was like one of the worst things for me. And then I remember in my first job out of college, was at Quora. I was working on the newsfeed. And so I owned the code for the newsfeed. And so I was a reviewer for newsfeed. And it was just like the central piece of code that everyone would touch. And so I would just, every morning I'd log in and be like 20 to 30 code reviews. And just like, oh my goodness, I gotta get through all of these. I would procrastinate and then it grows to like 50. And so there's like a lot of code reviews. Codex is really good at reviewing code. So actually one thing that we've noticed that 5.2 in particular has gotten extremely adept at is reviewing code, and especially when you kind of steer it in the right direction. And so for code reviews, yeah, we create a lot of PRs, but Codex reviews all of them. And it makes, code reviews go from a, 10, 15 minute task to sometimes even just like a 2 to 3 minute task because you have a bunch of suggestions already baked in. A lot of the times people will, especially for small PRs, like you actually don't even need people to review. You kind of trust Codex in this way. The original author kind of looked at Codex. It is, the benefit of code reviews, that second pair of eyes to make sure that you're not doing anything dumb. Codex is a pretty smart second pair of eyes at this point. And so that's something that we've heavily leaned into. The general CI process and like the post kind of push and like deployment process has also been heavily automated via Codex internally at this point. If you talk to a lot of engineers, the thing that annoys me most is after you've written your beautiful code, like how do you get it into production? You gotta run through all these tests, you gotta lint errors, you gotta code review. There's a lot of automated stuff you can do with Codex, and so we've actually built some tools internally that help automate that process, automate the lint. If there's like a lint error, it's a very easy Codex fix, and then you can just patch it and then kind of restart the CI process. So all of that is we're trying to collapse as little work for an engineer as possible, which and the byproduct of which is they can now merge and push out a lot more PRs.
Codex writing the code, Codex reviewing some code. I'm curious if you're open to using other models to review your model's work. Is that a path, or is it just it's good enough we don't need anything else?
So I will say there's definitely a circular thing here, and like going back to Sorcerer's Apprentice, like you want to make sure you're not letting the brooms go crazy here. And so we're very thoughtful, I'd say, around which PRs kind of are completely just codex reviewed. Most people still obviously take a look at their PRs, and so it's not like it's going to zero. It's more like going from 100% attention to like 30% attention, which just helps things push through. In terms of like multiple models, so we obviously test a lot of models internally, and so we have a lot of those. We use external models less. We think it's important to kind of dog food our own models and kind of like get feedback there. But you can also, there are a lot of like internal variants of models that you can use to give you different perspectives here as well, and we found that to work quite well.
Okay, so just to make sure we get like a barometer of today's world at OpenAI in terms of AI and code, just so I understand, and then I want to move on to a different topic. 100% of code across OpenAI is written by Codex at this point. Is that the way to frame it?
I wouldn't make the statement that 100% of code running in production today is written by AI. And it's kind of hard to do attribution there. But almost every engineer heavily uses Codex in all of their tasks at this point. And so if I were to guesstimate, like the vast majority of code at this point was probably authored by AI.
Incredible. Okay, so there's a lot of talk, and we've been talking about kind of the IC role, the work of an IC engineer. There's less talk about the changing role of a manager, especially an engineering manager. How has your life as a manager changed with the rise of AI, and just where do you think what's the role of a manager in the future?
It's definitely changed less than an engineer. There's no Codex for managers. Just yes. However, I use Codex quite a bit for some of the some of the like kind of more managerial tasks that I do. I'd say a couple things are changing. There are like some trends. So I don't think it's changed that much yet, but I see trends, and I think you play it out, you kind of see where a lot of this is going. One thing that's becoming increasingly clear is Codex really empowers like top performers to get to be a lot more productive, and so it really like. And I think this is maybe true for AI more broadly, like across society, which is like the people who really lean in are like the people who have high agency or like will really get good at these tools will kind of supercharge themselves. And so I'm kind of noticing this now as well, which is like the top performers kind of end up being a lot more productive. And so you see a broader spread in team productivity in this way. One thing that I've always done as a management philosophy is to spend actually the majority of my time with top performers, just like make sure they're on block, make sure they're happy, make sure they feel productive and they feel heard. I think this is even more true in an AI world where your top performers are going to just like really be shooting ahead using these tools. I think one example is that the team that's maintaining a 100% Codex generated code base, like just letting them kind of rip and see what's happening there is something that's paid dividends. So I think that's kind of one trend that I'm seeing where spending even more time with top performers for managers I think is likely going to continue. The other thing is, so this is more an observation, but my sense is with a lot of these AI tools available to managers, so less like writing code, but just things like ChatGPT with organizational knowledge, like being able to do research and understanding organizational context a lot better. Another good example is we're doing performance reviews right now, and it's actually really easy to use ChatGPT with internal knowledge hooked up to GitHub and like our Notion docs and Google Docs to get a really good sense of what this person has done over the last 12 months and writing a little deep research report for it. My sense is I think managers will be able to manage much larger teams in this world. Kind of like how like software engineers are managing 20 to 30 codexes. My sense of these tools will allow people managers to be higher leverage, and it will allow them to manage teams of way more than the current best practice of I think it's like 6 to 8, right, for a software engineer. You kind of see this applied to the non-engineering domains like support or operations, where it's like previously where previously like the size of the support team might be limited, but like as you can pass off more things to agents, you can actually do more work and also manage more people this way. I think the same thing might happen for people management as well, especially in tech companies. And we're already seeing this. There's some teams where their EM's managing quite a few people, and they're doing it pretty deftly because of some of these tools where they can get higher leverage and understand what their team's doing, understand their context a little bit better, and operate in that way.
I love this advice that with the way you described it is you've always leaned into top performers and spent more time with them and blocked them and make sure they're happy. The way Mark Andreessen is just on the podcast, the way he phrased it is AI makes good people better and it makes great people exceptional.
Yeah.
And what you're saying here is just doing this more and more is probably the right move. Spending more time with the best people on your team to unblock them, make sure they have everything they need.
Yeah, a very good example right now is there are, I would say, like a group of engineers internally who are really Codex built and are thinking through what the best practices are for interacting with this model. And that is just an extremely high leverage thing for them to do. And so just like as a manager, I'm just like, yeah, go explore this. Whatever best practices come out of this, we have to share with the org. Well, we do all these knowledge sharing sessions. We'll like share documents and like best practices everywhere. So things like that just elevate everyone. And so I view that as like another example of this trend that we're seeing where the top performers really get exception.
People just like have a sense. This is big. AI is changing so much. The world is changing. It's going to be a huge deal. What do you think people aren't pricing in yet into what will change, into where things are heading? Just like what's an example of something you think you're like, okay, we're not realizing this yet.
So one of my favorite kind of like phrases or like things that have come out of this whole AI wave is the idea of the $1 billion startup. I think Sam may have keyed it, or like Sam may have been the first one to say it, but it's fascinating to think about, right? It's like, yeah, if people are so high leverage, at some point there will likely be a $1 billion startup. And while I think that's really, really cool, I think people aren't really pricing in the second or third order effects of this. And really what, because what the $1 billion startup implies is that there's, one person can just have so much more agency and so much more leverage using one of these tools that it is just super easy for them to get everything done that they need to for their business to, ultimately create something that's $1 billion. But I think there are a couple other implications of this. So one of them is if it's easy for a person to create a or if it's possible for a person to create a $1 billion startup, it also means it's way easier for people to just create startups in general. Like I actually think this will, like one second order effect of this is I think there's going to be a huge like startup boom and like small like SMB style boom where anyone can build software for anything, right? Like you're kind of starting to see this play out in the AI startup scene where software became a lot more vertical oriented, where like these verticals, like creating some AI tool for some vertical tends to work quite well because you really lean into that particular domain, you like really understand the use case for it. And so if you play out AI, there's no reason why you can't have like 100x more of these startups. And so I think one world that we might end up seeing happen is in order to enable a one-person billion-dollar startup, there might be like 100 other small startups building bespoke software that works extremely well to support other types of small one-person billion-dollar startups. And so I think we might actually enter into a golden age of like B2B SaaS and just like software and startups in general. And so I think that's a really interesting trend to kind of see, because as it gets easier and easier to build software, as it's easier and easier to run a company, you might actually just end up seeing way more of these startups. So the way I'm thinking about it is like, yeah, there might be one-person billion-dollar startup, or there might be like 100 $100 million startups. There might be tens of thousands of $10 million startups. And as an individual, it's actually pretty great to have a $10 million business. Like that's like enough you're set for life at that point. And so, we might really see an explosion in that way. And I feel like people aren't really, pressing that in. There's another kind of like third order effect of this. And again, all of these, like as you get to the further and further out predictions, I think there's a lot of uncertainty. I think if we end up moving to this world where you end up with these like kind of micro companies building software that works for one or two people who own the company and are working there, I think the startup ecosystem will change. I think the VC ecosystem will change. We might end up in a world where there's just like a handful of big players that are offering platforms and supporting all of these startups. But the types of venture scale return startups that can really 100,000x your investment might actually end up shrinking if you end up having a bunch of these smaller $10 to $50 million companies, which are not great for venture dollar return, but are great for the individuals, the high agency individuals who are now really leaning into AI to build these businesses for themselves.
I love how many order effects we've been through. I want to get the fourth order effect now, sure. I'm just joking.
Fourth order is too gigabrain for me. I can't think that far ahead.
It's like Inception, where just everything gets slower every time you go deeper into something.
Yeah.
Every layer. Okay, so the billion-dollar startup, I think about this a lot because I'm not going to be a billion-dollar startup because what I'm doing is not venture scale in any way and not super high leverage, but just seeing how many support tickets I get from just like the most ridiculous things, it's hard for me to imagine one person. Like I'm bearish on this billion-dollar startup. I just want to share this thought. Simply because of the support costs. Even if AI is helping you at $1 billion, just like unless your ACVs are very high and you have very few customers, it's just dealing with support. And people are like like they can solve their own problems, but they're like, we want support. Ask about this thing. Just dealing with that is hard to scale, is in my experience. So unless you have, in my opinion, unless you have a bunch of contractors, which I don't know, does that count as a single person company? I feel like it's very difficult to scale a $1 billion startup and not have someone helping you with at least the support work. And AI, I think, will only take you so far.
So I think that's true. And actually, I think my view on it is slightly different, which is I think that your Lenny's podcast might end up becoming a $1 billion startup. But what I think might happen is instead of you kind of being the one person who has to dispatch an AI to solve and fix those support tickets, I think what might end up happening is there might be a whole smattering of other startups that are building software and super tailored towards what you might need. And so there might be like 10 or 20 startups that build support software for podcasts and newsletters, and that might be a one-person startup. Like it doesn't need to be a big one. And they might be able to just code up this product very, very easily. They are able to kind of like build their own thing, and because it's so tailored and unique and hopefully useful for you, it might be something that you purchase as the one-person billion-dollar startup.
I would buy that.
Yeah, there's like a question of like what you in-house and what you like kind of outsource. And what I think might happen is because the cost of writing software and building products is collapsing so much, you might end up outsourcing a lot of this, and in doing so, reducing the size of your company. And so that's kind of the world that I think might end up happening. Again, there's like high uncertainty in what might play out here, but the end result still might be a one person driving this like high massive leverage company that might actually reach $1 billion.
I can see that. I also think about Peter at Clawbot/Molebot/OpenClaw, of just like how he barraged you right now by all these asks and emails and pings and DMs and PRs. Just like I'm curious, and he's not even making any money off this thing.
Yeah, I can't imagine what it's like to be him right now. It must be like absolutely insane. It's probably like like the months after we launched ChatGPT, the craziness that was.
As one man. He's coming on the pod, by the way, in a week.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah.
Maybe the fourth order effect is distribution becomes increasingly important because there are so many freaking things trying to get your attention. So people with an audience and platform, I think, become more and more valuable, which is good. Good stuff. Okay. I wanted to come back actually to your management stuff. So I really loved your insights about spending more time with our performers has been really successful to you. Just thinking about you as a manager of a team that is building the platform that powers basically the entire AI economy, like every AI startup is building on your API. Clearly, you're doing a great job. What other kind of core management lessons have you learned? What do you find is really important and key to your success as a manager of engineers and just people?
Yeah, I think a lot of the lessons that I've learned here, I don't know how specific it is to the OpenAI API or some of our enterprise products in particular. I think my management philosophy has obviously changed over time, but I think it's probably stayed the same more than it's changed over time. One of these principles is kind of what I talked to you about before, which is spending a lot of time with top performers, like actually spending, and like to be very concrete, like it's like more than 50% of your time with your top performers, with maybe your top like 10% performers, and really trying your best to empower them. The way that I think about it is is kind of come back to this analogy of software engineer as a surgeon, which comes from the mythical Man Month book. So it's funny. So I pull it from the book, but in the book they actually describe this world where I think they were like predicting the future because I think the book was written like in the 70s or something. They said that software engineering might end up moving into a world where that software engineers are like surgeons, or like in a surgery room there's like one person doing the work. There's one person like cutting or whatever and like doing all the surgery, and everyone else in the room is there to just support them, right? It's like the nurse and like the assistant, the resident and the fellow, and then the surgeon's like, I need a scalpel, and they give them a scalpel, and then they're like, I need this tool and this machine, and they'll bring it over. Everyone's there to just like support the one surgeon. And so the mythical mammoth actually predicted that is kind of the direction that software engineering can go. I don't think that's exactly played out where like it's much more collaborative and like it's not only one person doing the work. But I've always really liked that analogy, and that analogy is actually what I strive to kind of like emulate in my own management philosophy, which is software engineering isn't really like surgery, where it's not just one person doing work, but the way in which I like treating the people on my team and the way that I act as a manager is I want to empower them, make them feel like they're a surgeon, and insofar as making sure that I'm supporting them, making sure they have everything that they need to do their work, and it feels like they have an army of people kind of supporting them, and looking around corners and giving them everything that they need, when it's really just me as the manager. And so like the example that I give is looking around corners and unblocking people, especially from an organizational perspective, is extremely useful. And again, going back to the AI conversation, it's even more important nowadays, right? Like if people are just like cranking PR after PR, the main thing bottlenecking progress and shipping something tends to be organizational or like process oriented. And if you as a manager can kind of look around corners and kind of unblock the team, if you can, like if the surgeon needs scalpel, but the manager kind of already has a scalpel ready for them, that's the best case scenario. That's kind of the way that I approach management and especially engineering management. And so that's something that's really stuck with me over time. And even though software engineers aren't exactly surgeons, that metaphor is always kind of stayed in my mind as of risk career.
I love that, and I feel like I wonder if that's something AI can help with, is look around corners and predict, here, this engineer is going to be blocked by this decision. We need to figure this out.
That's actually a really good point. I haven't tried this yet, but I wonder what would happen if I ask ChatGPT hooked up to company knowledge, like what are the active blockers? Look through all the Notion docs. What are maybe Slack messages? It's probably in Slack somewhere. What are the active blockers on my team? And is there something I can do to help? That's actually very. I have not thought about that, but you
just had an insight right here.
Yeah.
And I think even more interestingly, what do you anticipate will be a blocker for this engineer or this team in the coming months?
You asked the model, you asked the AI to do the second and third order things. Anticipate that, and anticipate what the blockers will be next month too.
Great. I think we've got a good idea right here.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Datadog, now home to Epo, the leading experimentation and feature flagging platform. Product managers at the world's best companies use Datadog, the same platform their engineers rely on every day to connect product insights to product issues like bugs, UX friction, and business impact. It starts with product analytics, where PMs can watch replays, review funnels, dive into retention, and explore their growth metrics. Where other tools stop, Datadog goes even further. It helps you actually diagnose the impact of funnel drop-offs and bugs and UX friction. Once you know where to focus, experiments prove what works. I saw this firsthand when I was at Airbnb, where our experimentation platform was critical for analyzing what worked and where things went wrong. And the same team that built the experimentation at Airbnb built Epo. Datadog then lets you go beyond the numbers with session replay. Watch exactly how users interact with heat maps and scroll maps to truly understand their behavior. And all of this is powered by feature flags that are tied to real-time data, so that you can roll out safely, target precisely, and learn continuously. Datadog is more than engineering metrics. It's where great product teams learn faster, think smarter, and ship with confidence. Request a demo at datadoghq.com/link. That's datadoghq.com/link. Okay, I'm going to shift to talking about the API and the platform that you all build. So you work with a lot of companies implementing your API, your platform, building on your tools. You told me that you find that a lot of companies actually have negative ROI on their AI deployments, which I think is what a lot of people read about and feel and think. And it's interesting actually seeing that. What's going on there? What are they doing wrong? What's happening in the world with AI deployments in ROI?
Yeah, so to be clear, I don't explicitly see quantitative numbers around this. It's actually really hard to measure these things. But especially from observing some companies kind of trying to do AI, I would not be surprised if a lot of AI deployments are actually negative ROI. I mean, part of this too is I think there's also general sentiment from folks around the country, like basically outside of tech, that AI is being forced onto them. And I think part of this is probably a symptom of some negative ROI AI deployments. A couple of things I've observed around this. So one thing is, and I think I come back to this again and again, I think we in Silicon Valley just forget that we live in a bubble. We are so, Twitter is a bubble, sorry, X is a bubble, Silicon Valley is a bubble, software engineering is a bubble. Most people in the world, most people in the US are not software engineers, are not very AI pilled, are not following every single model release. And so we're just highly out of the loop on how to use this technology. And so, we always talk about all these best practices for Codex, all these Codex pill people within OpenAI. I'm sure everyone on X who posts are crazy power users of these AI tools. They lean into skills, they lean into agents.md,
MCPs.
Yes, yeah, all that. And when I talk to some of these companies and I talk to the actual employees using these, it's the most basic thing that they're trying to do, and they have very little understanding of exactly how this technology works. And so that's kind of one big observation for me, which is they're asking very simple questions of these things. They're really not pushing it just yet. And so that kind of goes back to that kind of ties into what I think more companies do, or what should do, or what a more ideal AI deployment setup looks like. And this is kind of how we run things within OpenAI too. The companies where I think it's starting to work really well have a combination of both top-down buy-in. So it's like the C-suite's like, we want to become an AI first company. So there's buy-in, they buy the tools, they have, exec support. But it also has bottoms-up adoption and buy-in. And so what I mean by that is it has like actual employees doing the work who are really excited about technology and are willing to learn, evangelize, build best practices, and kind of like knowledge share within the organization. We've seen this a lot internally. So like obviously OpenAI has always wanted to be a very AI-centric company, but when it really started taking off was with the introduction of Codex and these tools where like people like actual employees themselves could start applying it to their work. And I think you really need this because at the end of the day, everyone's work is like very different. It's like very unique. Software engineering is different than finance, is different than operations, different than go-to-market and sales. And so there's like a lot of these like last mile intricacies of work that needs to really be done in a bottoms-up fashion. And so my sense is a lot of these data deployments don't have bottoms-up adoption. Like it was like an exec mandate and it's extremely top-down. And it's very divorced from what the actual work looks like. And as an end result, you end up with a giant workforce that doesn't really understand the technology. Is like, I know I'm supposed to use this, and maybe it's like on my performance review too, but I'm not sure what to do. They look around, no one else is doing it. There's no one else to learn from. And so my recommendation for companies kind of pushing this is find, or maybe even staff a full-time team internally that is this kind of tiger team internally that can explore the full extent of the capabilities, apply to specific workflows, do the knowledge sharing, create excitement within folks who might want to use this technology. Because in the absence of that, it's actually very difficult to pick up.
And who would you put on this tiger team? Is it like engineer-led? Do you find in your experience? Is it a cross-functional sort of team?
Yeah, it's interesting because also a lot of companies don't have software engineers. And so the pattern I've seen is it tends to be these like software engineering adjacent, like basically technical people that are not software engineers. I think those are the ones who tend to get most excited around this. It's like, maybe the support team operations lead who doesn't code but loves using these tools and is like an Excel wizard or something. And so it's like technical adjacent or like coding adjacent and like pretty technical. Those are the kinds of people I've seen in these companies who just like really light up and get excited around this. And you can usually build a team around that. But yeah, it's like oftentimes not software engineers. Software engineers I think will understand this, but not every company has a software engineers. It's actually kind of a rarity. They're hard to find. They're expensive. And so it's these other types of folks.
What I'm hearing is the anti-pattern is top down. This is very the CEO found the exec team just like we are going to go AI first. We're going to lean into AI. Everyone's going to be judged on their performance using AI tools. How much your productivity is increasing thanks to AI. And with that being just top down and not creating a team that is bottom up, spreading the gospel, you find that doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
And the advice is find the people that are most excited, and instead of kind of having them spread out through the organization, what you find works is create a little AI kind of evangelist team that finds ways to use it and kind of spreads it across the work.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of like hearing you play back to me, another way to think about it, kind of tying back to my own management philosophies, is find the high performers in AI adoption and empower them. Let them build hackathons, let them, hold seminars, do knowledge sharing, kind of create the seeds of excitement internally.
Okay, amazing. There's a couple hot takes I want to hear from you, something that I've seen you talk about and share. One is you've shared that talking to customers and listening to customers is not always the right strategy in AI, and it might often lead you astray.
I don't know if it's that hot of a take. I think the main thing here is, so obviously you should talk to customers. Like it's like you still talk to customers. I just think the AI field, especially what I've seen over the last kind of like 3 years, working on the API and seeing kind of all that evolve, is the field and the models themselves are just changing so quickly. They tend to like disrupt themselves, especially around the like tooling and the scaffolding space. So there's this quote that I read actually earlier this week from an X article by this guy named Nicholas, who's the founder of a startup called FinTool, where I think he was sharing a lot of the best practices that he's learned through building AI agents for financial services. I think at a start FinTool. And he had this phrase that I thought was really good, which is the models will eat your scaffolding for breakfast. Like if you rewind back to 2022, right when ChatGPT launched, these models are pretty raw. And there was like all this product scaffolding and things, especially in the developer space, to basically try and steer the model and build scaffolding around it to get it to do what you want. So like agent frameworks, there's like vector stores, I think was like really popular back then, and just like a whole smattering of tools here. And as you've kind of seen the field play out, that the models have just changed so much and have gotten so much better that they end up literally eating some of the scaffolding. And I think this is even true today. So I think the article from Nicholas actually, the current scaffolding, which is fashionable, is skills, files-based context management. I could see a world where at some point, that's no longer useful, where the model can actually, manage all that themselves, or like, or there might be, it's hard to predict, but like might move on to some new paradigm where you no longer need this file-based like skills type thing. You've literally seen this play out, right? Like the agent frameworks I think are a little less useful now. There's a period of time like 2023 where we thought vector stores is going to be like the main way for you to, bring organizational context into the models. And you need to, vectorize and embed every bit of your corpuses, and then you do all this work to like figure out the vector search to like optimize that to pull out the right information at the right time. All of that is scaffolding because the model, was not good enough. And turns out, in this case, as the models get better, a better approach is actually to take out a lot of that logic and trust the model and give it a set of tools for search. It doesn't need to be a vector store. You can actually just hook it up to any type of search. It could literally be files on a file system like skills and agents MD to kind of steer it as well. Obviously, there's still a place for vector stores. I know a lot of companies are still using it, but the entire scaffolding around that and building an entire ecosystem around that and assuming that's the only scaffolding that you need has really changed. And so tying this back to like, it's, you don't always have to listen to your customers because the field is changing so much. At any point in time, a lot of people are kind of in this local maximum. And if you just blindly listen to your customers, they'll be like, yeah, I want a better vector store. Like I want a better agent framework for this. And if you had just kind of only chased down that path, it actually would have led you to, build something that again is a local maxima. Whereas as the models get better, we've had to reinvent and kind of rethink the right abstractions and the right tools and frameworks to build around these models. And the cool / exciting / kind of crazy annoying part is it's a moving target. And so yeah, like the current smattering of tools and frameworks right now will likely need to evolve and change pretty significantly over time as the models get smarter and better. But that is just the nature of building the space. I think that's what makes it exciting. But it also means when you talk to customers, you kind of need to balance the exact feedback that they want with where you think the models are going and where you think things will trend over the next 1 or 2 years.
It's interesting how this is the bitter lesson is this big lesson that AI and ML folks learn, which is just like the less you overcomplicate, the less logic you add to machine learning to AI, the more it'll be able to scale and grow and just like take it all away and let it just compute basically. Just give it more power to get smarter on its own.
There's literally a version of the bitter lesson applied to like building with AI where we were trying to architect all this stuff around and it turns out the models will just kind of eat it all away. And honestly, like OpenAI API team has like been guilty of this where we kind of like took some left and right turns when we shouldn't have. But the models get better and we're all learning the bitter lesson day in and day out.
So what would be the key takeaway for folks building on say the API or just building agents and having to build a little bit of this around for now? Is it just what would be the advice?
My general advice, and I've been giving this to people for a while, and I think still true today, is make sure you're building for where the models are going and not where they are today. It's clearly a moving target, and I think a lot of the companies that I've seen, startups that I've seen really do well, is they build a product for an ideal like type of capability that is like maybe 80% of the way there today, and it like they end up having a product that like kind of works, but it's like just almost there. But then as the models get better, suddenly it might click, and then the product now is incredible because it works, like maybe like 03 at some point suddenly works, 5.1, 5.2 suddenly unlocks it. But they're building these products with the like model capability improvements in mind, and with that you end up creating an experience that's way better than if you had assumed that it's static in the first place. And so that'd be my general advice, which is build for where the models are going and not where they are today. You end up building a better product. You may need to like wait a little bit, but like the models are getting so much better so quickly, you often don't need to wait that long.
So to follow that thread, where are like in the next 6 to 12 months? Where is the API heading? Where's the platform heading? Where are the models heading? As much as you can share. I know there's a lot of secrets here that maybe you're most excited about, or do you think that people should start to prepare for it, however much you can share?
I mean, so the obvious one is how long of a task these models can do coherently. So there's like the meter benchmark that I think tracks software engineering tasks and how long, how long of a task can these models do 50% of the time, 80% of the time. I think we're at something like multi-hour tasks being able to be done by software engineering tasks being able to be done by these frontier models 50% of the time, and I think 80% is something like just under an hour. But the sobering thing about that chart is they plot all the previous models on this chart as well. They can really see the trend of this. That's something that I'm really excited about, which is, I actually think products today really optimize for tasks that the model can do for like minutes at a time. Like even codecs and like the coding tools, I'd say like, it's in the CLI, you're kind of like seeing it be interactive. It's really, quite optimized well for like maybe almost 10-minute type tasks. I have seen people push codecs to the limit into like multi-hour long tasks. But again, I think that's more the exception. But if you follow this trend, like I think like in the next 12 to 18 months, we could see models that could do multi-hour long tasks very, very coherently. At some point, it might reach like 6 hours, a day-long task where you kind of like dispatch it and how to do do things on its own for a while. The types of products you build around that will look very different. You want to give the model feedback. You obviously don't want it to completely run wild for a day. Maybe you do, but you probably don't. And then the universe of things you can have the model do really expands. So that's something that I'm really excited about seeing. Another thing over the next 12 to 18 months I think would be really cool is improvements in the multimodal models. So and actually by multimodality, I'm mostly thinking about audio here, where the models are pretty good at audio. I think they're going to get a lot better at audio over the next 6 to 12 months, especially the native multimodal models, the speech-to-speech ones. I think there's also interesting work being done around new types of models and architectures on the multimodal audio side as well. But audio, especially in the enterprise and in a business setting, I think is a hugely underrated domain still. Like everyone talks about coding, it's all text. But we're talking in audio. A lot of the world's business is done via audio. A lot of services and operations are done via talking and audio. And so I think that area is going to look very exciting in the next 12 to 18 months. And I think there will be even more unlock for what we can do with audio models there as well.
Amazing. So quick summary, expect agents and AI tools to run longer, to that trajectory to continue to increase, and then audio and speech becoming a bigger deal, more first party and native and better and core to the experience. Yeah, extremely cool. Okay, I want to go back to one of your hot takes, another hot take that I've seen you discuss. You're very bullish on business process automation as an opportunity in the world of AI. Talk about that.
Yeah, this goes back to the thing that I said previously, which is we live in a bubble in Silicon Valley, and a lot of the work that we do, that we're used to, software engineering, product management, building products, is very differently shaped than the work that goes on that runs our entire economy. And I see this in and out when I talk to customers. If you talk to any company that's not based in, it's not a tech company, there's a lot of business processes. And so what I mean by this is I generally delineate it as there's like software engineering is kind of like open-ended knowledge work, right? It's like, and this is why I think tools like Codex tend to be quite good, because it's exploring and you're giving it these like open-ended things. But software engineering is fundamentally like pretty open-ended and it's not very repeatable, right? So like you build a feature, you're not trying to build the exact same feature over and over again. And a lot of like tech jobs are in the space. I think like data science is kind of in the space as well. So even some of the like strategic finance stuff. But as you move further and further away from software engineering and like what is core in tech, a lot of jobs are just business processes. They're like repeatable things, repeatable operations that some manager at a company has kind of like iterated on. There's usually a standard operating procedure that people want to do, and you don't want to deviate from it that much. There's like in software engineering, the ingenuity isn't deviating, but a lot of the work being done in the world is actually just running through these procedures and operations. Like if I call a support line, they're running through one of these. If I call my utility company, there's a bunch of processes and things that they can and cannot do for me. And so I'm just extremely bullish on this general category of like, and I think it's underrated because it's so different from what we think about in Silicon Valley. People tend to not think about it. But how can we apply AI and some of the tools and frameworks that we have towards this business process automation, towards automating and making easier repeatable business processes with high determinism that is fully integrated with business data and business decisions and different systems within an enterprise, and how can we actually make that process better? Because I actually think there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of work to be done in that area, and we just don't talk about it because it's a little bit less in our wheelhouse.
So your take here, just to make sure I fully understand it, is you think there's a much bigger opportunity outside of engineering for AI to impact productivity of companies and also jobs of these folks that are doing these kind of repetitive, easily automated tasks.
Impact jobs and also just impact how work is done. Like so much of work is done in this way. Like you think about basically I talk to customers all the time, big enterprises, like how will AI transform my company? Like how will it run in a world with AI in like 20 years? And software engineering is part of the story, but there's so much more on the business process side, and I actually think it might look even more different on the business process side, and the work there is pretty substantial. It's actually interesting. I don't know, like from an absolute percentage or absolute basis, I don't know if it's bigger or smaller than software engineering. Like software is pretty huge and pretty expensive as well, but it is pretty massive, and it's definitely bigger than it's bigger than you would think it is based off of how people talk about it or don't talk about it on X or Twitter.
Okay, in going in a slightly different direction, having built a platform, building an API, people building an API, the biggest question on people's minds is always just, how do I not have OpenAI squash my idea and build their own thing and then destroy this market I created? What's the general policy? What's the general philosophy of how startups should think about where OpenAI is unlikely to go?
My general answer here is the market is so big and so massive. Like I actually think startups should just not overly think about where OpenAI or these labs are going. I've talked to a lot of startups that have not worked out, startups that are doing really well. Every startup that I've seen that has kind of fizzled out is not because OpenAI or big lab or Google or something has come to squash them. It's because they built something and it like really didn't resonate with the customers. Whereas the ones that take off, like even in very competitive spaces like coding, like Cursor's huge at this point, and it's because they built something that people really love. And so my general advice is like don't overly stress about this. Just build something that people like, and you will have a space in this. I can't overstate how big of an opportunity there is right now. Like the opportunity space of building with AI is so big. Like a good example of this is like space is so big that the overton window of what is acceptable and not acceptable for VCs to do has completely changed here. Like VCs are like investing in like competitive companies left and right. It's just like the space is so big because the opportunity is unlike anything that we've seen before. And while that affects how VCs operate, from a startup perspective, it's like the most empowering thing in the world because even if you just build something that some people really really love, you will end up with a massively valuable business. And so that's why I tell people like don't overthink about it. The other thing like I also think is important to remember, at least from an OpenAI perspective, one thing that we've always held very near and dear, which both Sam and Greg helped reinforce from the talk as well, is we actually view ourselves fundamentally as a like ecosystem platform company. The API was our first product. We think it's really important for us to foster this ecosystem and continue to support it and not squash it. And so if you kind of look at the decisions we make, this is all weave through it. Every single model we've released in one of our products gets released in API. Like even we release these Codex models now that are a little bit more optimized for the Codex harness. But they always find their way into the API, and like all of our customers end up using those. We don't hold back on any of that. We think it's really important to keep our platform neutral, and so we don't block competitors. We allow people to have access to our models. We also want we've recently been testing more of like the sign-in with ChatGPT product as well. And so we want to foster this ecosystem. I think it's really important that we do so. The general thinking about this is like a rising tide lifts all boats, and we might be an aircraft carrier, we're like pretty big at this point, but we think it's important to raise the tide because everyone kind of benefits, and I think we'll benefit as well. Like our API itself has grown pretty significantly because we act in this way, and so I'd really encourage people not to view OpenAI as this kind of like thing that'll just shove people out of the way, but instead focus on building something valuable, and we remain committed to providing an open ecosystem.
Why is that important to OpenAI? Just this focus on building a platform, creating a way for people to build businesses. That's been the vision from the beginning. We want this to be a platform.
It's been the vision from the beginning. It goes back to our charter actually, like our mission. So the OpenAI's mission has always been to build AGI. So we're always doing that. But then the second thing is to like spread the benefits of it to all of humanity. And there's kind of like a lot of the main part there is all of humanity. Like and obviously ChatGPT is trying to do this. We're trying to reach however many the whole world. But very early on, and this is why we launched the API back in I think it's like 2020 or something, like really early. We don't think we as a company will be able to reach all of humanity, right? Like there's every corner of the world is like pretty deep, and so we actually feel like in order for us to fulfill our mission, we need to have some platform style thing here where we can empower other people to build, the customer support bot for podcasters and newsletter hosts, because we're not going to be able to do it ourselves. And so we've largely seen this play out with the API. This is why we talk to so many of our customers and really love seeing the diversity of things built on. But yeah, it's been there since day one because it's kind of, we view it as an expression of our mission.
You haven't even mentioned the App Store that you guys are launching, the ChatGPT App Store.
Yeah.
Is that under your umbrella, by the way, or is that a different org team?
It's a different team, so it's under ChatGPT. We obviously collaborate very closely with them, and they built like an apps SDK, which is built in close collaboration with their team. But that is more within the ChatGPT umbrella. But that is also another example of this, right? It's like ChatGPT is like we kind of like have these 800 million weekly active users who are just coming over and over again. Like it's a great asset to have as a business, but like man, would it be better if we could somehow allow other companies to come in and take advantage of this as well and build for this audience as well. And then ultimately we think it'll help us expand that group as well, right? And so it all kind of comes back to the mission, and we find that being a platform, being open, tends to help here.
Just that number, 800 million, I think it's MAUs. Just like
no, it's weekly.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
1 billion people using weekly. It's absurd having how these numbers we're just used to now, but that's insane, unprecedented.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling for me to think about from a scale perspective, honestly. And the way I think about it is like 10% of the world, and growing, by the way, like it's shooting up, come to ChatGPT and use it every week.
At this point, I just want to double down on this point you're making. OpenAI's mission was to make AI available to all humanity. And I think some people diss that. They're like, oh, it costs money. And it's like the fact that there's a free version of ChatGPT that anybody can use that is not so different from the most powerful AI model that exists in the world for free, that's not gated, that anyone can use. Like if you're a billionaire, there's only so much more you can get out of AI than what someone, in a village in Africa can get. And I know that's always been really important to OpenAI.
Yeah. I mean, like that's why I think we've leaned into the health work. We've leaned into education is going to be very interesting here. The other insane kind of trend here is the free model has gotten so smart over time. Like the free model back in 2022 was, was good at the time, but it's like nothing compared to what you get today. So you get 5 today. And so the raising the floor across the world is kind of something that we're really trying to do, and we view it as part of our mission. The other flip side of this, by the way, is kind of talking about like the billionaires or whatever. I know people are saying like you're using the same iPhone that Mark Zuckerberg's probably using, or like the billionaires are using. Like for like $20 a month, you're basically using using the same AI that the billionaires are using. For like $200 a month, you get the same Pro model that all the billionaires are using, but they're probably not using Pro for everything. They're probably just using the plus tier ones for their day in and day out. And so yeah, this kind of like democratization and just like spreading of this benefit like across all of the world is something that's really meaningful to us and something that drives a lot of what we do.
One last question, just for folks that are thinking about building on the API, or just like, oh wait, I could do cool stuff with OpenAI's models and APIs. What does your API and platform allow people to do? Like I know you can build agents on top of the platform. Just talk about what you allow.
So fundamentally, the API offers a bunch of developer endpoints, and these developer endpoints basically let you sample from our models. The most popular one that we have right now is one called Responses API, and so this is an endpoint, and it's optimized for building long-running agents, so agents that'll work for a while. So what you can basically use, you can at a very low level, you're basically just giving the model text. The model will work for a while. You can kind of pull it to see what it'll do, and then you'll get the model response back at some point. That's like the lowest level primitive that we have for people, and that's actually what a lot of people use. That's the most popular way of building on top of our API. With that, it is like super unopinionated, and you can do basically whatever you want. It's like the lowest level thing. We've also started building more and more kind of like layers of abstraction on top to help people build some of these. And so next layer up, we have this thing called the Agents SDK, which has also gotten extremely popular. This allows you to use, the Responses API or some other API endpoints that we have to build what you might more traditionally think of as an agent, like an AI kind of working in an infinite loop. It might have sub-agents that it delegates to. It starts building all this framework, all the scaffolding actually. We'll see where this all goes. But it makes it a lot easier for you to build these kind of agents, giving it guardrails, allowing it to like farm out subtasks to other agents and kind of like orchestrate a swarm of agents. The Agents SDK kind of allows you to do that. And then above that, we've now started building tools to help also with kind of like the meta level of deploying an agent. So we have this product called Agent Kits and widgets, which are basically a bunch of UI components that you can use to very easily build a very beautiful UI on top of either our API or Agents SDK, because a lot of times these agents kind of look very similar from a UI perspective. So there's Agent Kit. We also have a smattering of like evals products, like evals API, where you want to test and like see if your models or your agent or workflow is working. You can test it in a very quantitative way using our evals product. And so yeah, I view it as like a deeper layer. They're all kind of helping build what you want with our AI, with our models, and with increasing levels of abstraction and how opinionated it is. And so you can use the whole stack, and it very quickly allows you to build an agent, or you can go down the stack as low as you want to basically Responses API and build whatever you want.